Welcome in to another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com of the On3 Sports Network. John Alden with you as always. Hope you enjoyed your 4th of July weekend, a long weekend for many people, I assume. I took an extra long weekend. I'm also off today, Monday. Decided to do a 4-day weekend. That's the beauty of using your paid time off to give yourself some extra long weekends every once in a while. I enjoyed myself this weekend. Not a big fireworks person. I think I mentioned that before. I feel like when you're a kid and you have 4th of July weekend going on, or you go over to a 4th of July, barbecue, whatever it may be, fireworks are really for the kids for the most part. And it doesn't mean adults can't enjoy fireworks, but when you're a kid and you see all of that stuff going off and blowing up for the first time when you're really young, it leaves a lot more of an impression on you, I feel like. It's kind of like the different, really every holiday has its little thing that it appeals more to children more so than adults. And that's just the way things are meant to be, I feel like. Maybe I'm overthinking too much about it. But either way, I feel like when you're an adult and you got, a dog in the house, you got a kid, whatever it may be, the fireworks can almost be more of a nuisance. But we've learned to deal with that, especially with the dog. Our dog Lily, she's not the biggest fan of fireworks or things like thunderstorms, and we found ways to kind of pacify that. And so I don't want to sound like an old man yells at cloud type thing when it comes to 4th of July, but still enjoyed the weekend. And like I mentioned before, I also watched the Black Sabbath farewell/reunion with Ozzy Osbourne. That was a fun thing to take in on Saturday. I wasn't really sure what to expect with that. I know Ozzy was, he's kind of getting up there in age, as are the rest of the members of Black Sabbath. But for those who don't follow along with all of that, maybe the way that I do, Ozzy's got or has had Parkinson's disease for quite some time now. And I was curious how it was going to affect his performance. Those who put together the show did a good job at setting Ozzy up for success, by giving him this like big old throne that he was sitting on. He sat during both of his sets, his Ozzy set and then his Black Sabbath set, of course. But I thought that, given the circumstances, given his age, he sounded great. And I enjoyed watching with the in-laws. We went over to their place. My father-in-law's a big rock and roll / heavy metal fan like myself. So enjoyed watching that. Justin Beard, I saw you commented on last week's episode, mentioned you'd be streaming the Sabbath event as well. I hope we said you had a metalhead uncle you were going over to watch it with. Hopefully you guys had a good time with that. I wish I got to watch more of it. I only get to watch the last, the Ozzy and Black Sabbath parts of the show. But I do still have access to watch the replay of the live stream if I want to go back and see some of the Metallica or Guns N' Roses stuff that I missed. I did see some of the set lists that were posted, and I do want to see some of the covers that were done by the other bands that were in attendance. So I'm going to try to check that out before my live stream ticket expires. I got to say, though, $30 to watch that was a great deal. Whenever I saw that they were going to live stream the event, I thought they were going to, rip people off and make this cost upwards of $100, that sort of thing. So props to, I guess, Black Sabbath, whoever organized it, for making only $30, very affordable, and a good time to experience as well. Also, Mike Shenanigans, he also commented on last week's episode. He'd mentioned that he had already had his fun with Black Sabbath in the past, and he had mentioned that before. I do remember that comment from, I guess, a few months ago when I talked about when they had announced that was going to take place. I'm not going to go back and search and read that comment verbatim, but I do remember it being kind of a funny story from your past, if I do say so myself, Mr. Shenanigans. But welcome back in. Welcome back to another episode of In Touch with Indiana Sports. You may wonder, is this really a sports show? You're a few minutes in now, and you're talking about 4th of July, Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath. That's just what we do around here, especially during the summertime as we're getting through kind of the dull parts of the sports calendar. And thankfully, we're not very far away now. I was looking at the calendar before I started recording this, actually, just to kind of see how close we were to Big Ten football media days, the unofficial kickoff of college football season for me. I know there's the other media days as well, but the one that I really care about and pay attention to, Big Ten football media days, we're only 2 weeks out from that. And I did not realize that we were only a couple of weeks away from that. Like, I knew it was this month. I knew it was, July 22nd or whatever it was when it got kicked off. But to say out loud that it's only 2 weeks away, it makes me very happy that we are not far away from having, kind of starting anew when it comes to college football, resetting things. Again, I mentioned this before already. This show, In Touch with Indiana Sports, launched with last year's Big Ten football media days. So, and of course, we're still a ways away from getting some actual college football, but it does kind of reinvigorate some of the storylines. It starts some things over, if you will. It gets people talking more about what's coming up. And I know I kind of gave some of my initial thoughts last week on what I expect of Indiana football, but it'll be nice to hear from Curt Cignetti in front of the Big Ten media once again. I know last year he gave us some incredible sound bites, really just because that's what he does. And I think we should expect less of that this year, just because, he had mentioned before that he doesn't always come in guns a-blazing with incredible one-liners the way that he had done quite a bit last year. But he felt that he needed to do some stuff, say some stuff like that to really kind of get people talking more about Indiana football, because people, I mean, if we're being honest, outside of the one decent year from Tom Allen, not many people from a national media perspective are talking about the Hoosiers when it comes to football. And if we're being honest, in basketball, they haven't been doing a lot of talking about them nationally in a while either. And hopefully that changes this upcoming year with Darren DeVries. But we'll get to more on that in a little bit. But yeah, I'm excited for Big Ten football media days, more so what Curt Cignetti has to say. I mean, I'm sure some of the other coaches will have some good things to say as well. It's also the first time that media days will be out in Vegas, which is weird. I know it makes more sense than ever before, simply because you have the teams from out in the West Coast. You have Washington, Oregon, UCLA, USC. I know that's why they're doing that. And I don't think we're too far away from having things like the Big Ten championship game being held out somewhere out west, whether it be Vegas or somewhere else. But we'll definitely continue to talk about all this as it comes up. I was hoping to have our friend Jeffrey the Greek on today for today's episode to talk more about some, the upcoming Big Ten football season. Unfortunately, with his schedule, wasn't able to make that work. So today is just going to be me. This is going to be a solo episode, going to likely be quite a bit shorter than what we normally do, but I'm hoping to make it up to you all next week and get not only Jeffrey the Greek, but I'd also like to get Zach Osterman on. I know I talked a few weeks ago about trying to hash everything out, all the new things that are coming to college athletics and trying to wrap our minds around all of it. I want to kind of pick Zach's brain about that. I do think and hope that he'll be available to record with me next week as well. So that's the plan for next week's show. But for now, you're just getting yours truly, John Alden. And I hope many of you are okay with that. I would assume if you've gotten this far, then you are. And I'm sure when you clicked on the episode and you didn't see the guest list, you probably realized already that there wasn't going to be anybody on today's show. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you for coming on and wanting to just hang out today as we go through kind of all of the latest happenings when it comes to the teams that we cover around here, IU, the Pacers. And we're even going to talk a little bit about Assembly Ball here in just a second as I take another sip of my brown sugar coffee. Shout out to Notting Hill in Delaware for this coffee. Of course, non-paid. Why would they be sponsoring an Indiana show if they're from Delaware? But nonetheless. Assembly Ball got another member, and as far as I know, this is the only new addition to the Assembly Ball squad since I last looked at this. But Luke Fisher, a very interesting piece to add for, I guess, a couple of different reasons to Assembly Ball. The first being, I hope I'm not wrong about this, but Luke Fisher's time at Indiana was very strange and it was very short lived. And he was a Tom Crean recruit, if I remember right. And I think he was a part of the recruiting class that was kind of, what was the best word to describe this? They were kind of known as the movement. I think Luke Fisher was a part of that class, which of course ended up not really panning out to be as big of a deal as was kind of made out to be, does that not always happen with Indiana basketball? I feel like the bigger deal we make about, especially when it comes to high school recruiting, the bigger deal we make about certain players, the more disappointing they are. And Romeo Langford's a big example of that. The movement, of course, as I just mentioned. I think Cody Zeller, he's somebody who did live up to that hype, had a really good supporting cast around him. I mean, that team was based around Cody Zeller's ability, like what he was able to do down low. But he had Victor Oladipo, Christian Watford, Yogi Ferrell, I believe. I think that coincided with his time at IU. But either way, point being, or I guess circling back to Luke Fisher joining Assembly Ball, he came to Indiana under Tom Crean, and he ended up leaving midway through the year. And I believe it had something to do with him being homesick. He was from Wisconsin. I believe he ended up transferring to Marquette, closer to his hometown, which is understandable. I mean, it's unfortunate, whenever you're going to college away from home, it can't be easy for everybody to just get up and leave home and get used to a brand new environment. And so, but to see somebody like Luke Fisher, again, it's a very random name that I don't think many people ever would have expected to be on the Assembly Ball squad. It's cool to see somebody who was very briefly an Indiana guy, still want to be part of the Indiana, I guess, alums. I know they're not all alums, but it's typically seen as alums of the basketball program. So I do think Indiana's looking to have a much more competitive squad this time around. Not that they weren't competitive last year, but they've added a lot more contributing pieces. Not to mention they had players last year who were injured, like Troy Williams ended up getting injured before the tournament. He also had Juwan Morgan. I don't think he was at full strength, if I remember right. Maybe I'm wrong. There was a couple of guys who weren't able to play due to injury. But that'll happen here in a couple of weeks as well, just before we get to Big Ten football media days. And that should take us, hopefully, if we get a nice run out of Assembly Ball like we did with the Indiana Pacers, that will carry us closer to the start of college football and give us some actual content, some actual real results to talk about before we get to the real meat and potatoes of college football season. Let's see. What else do we got here? D'Angelo Pons, cornerback for Indiana Hoosiers, of course. He was recently projected for next year's 2026 NFL draft as a first-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens. Very noteworthy, at least when it comes to, I guess, how his season is perceived to go this upcoming fall. And he's one of several defensive guys who will be expected to continue to have big roles on this year's team. But Pons is somebody who not only does he just do really well defending his opponents, but I mean, the amount of his interception, the ball hawk that he was, he's somebody that quarterbacks this year will be very aware of his presence on the defensive side of things. And I'm sure he won't have nearly as many balls thrown in his direction. Maybe you'll see it early on, but if he continues to prove that he is as good as he has been chalked up to be, quarterbacks won't be throwing in his direction as frequently as many Indiana fans would hope to. But who knows? It's still the college game. You don't get the professional quality quarterbacks week in and week out. And so they may not always make the right decisions. And he may be right there to snatch the ball out of somebody's hand. So good to see D'Angelo Pons kind of get some recognition heading into the fall. And I know I'm not even really talking preseason accolades like the preseason All-American stuff, that type of thing. You've heard me say in the past too that those don't mean a whole lot of anything. It's really just a reflection of kind of what you were able to do last year and kind of set expectations for the upcoming season, because a preseason accolade, like you did do something in the previous season, but because this is a preseason award, is it really an award? Have you really done anything? Again, it's all just speculation on how well you may end up doing this upcoming season. So we may take a look at some of those. Again, they don't mean a whole lot, but I will say this: you're not seeing Indiana football, the team as a whole, be projected to go back to a second consecutive college football playoff. You're also not really seeing them get mentioned at all as a team that's like a dark horse to get in by many people. Right now, Illinois is the hot name around the Big Ten that's kind of getting the love as kind of like this, like it's their time. Like they're the Indiana of 2025, 2026. But they might be. And what's incredible about that is both Indiana and Illinois play each other very early on in the schedule. I believe it's week 4, week 5, something like that. So both teams, depending on how they start out their campaigns for the 2025 season, I mean, if they're both unbeaten headed into that matchup, it's definitely going to be a tone setter for the rest of the season for the winner of that game, because the winner immediately becomes kind of the darling once again. It may be Indiana, it may be Illinois. And I guess calling them the darling of the conference kind of, it makes it seem like it almost seems degrading. I don't mean for it to sound that way, but they're kind of like, I guess maybe the dark horse to win the conference is what I'm getting at. A dark horse to kind of sneak into the college football playoff. And even if Indiana were to come away with the win against Illinois in that game, I mean, they still have plenty of difficult hurdles to get over this upcoming season, including at Iowa, at Oregon, at Penn State. That trio of road games alone will be very difficult to come out of unscathed, and it'll be difficult to win any of those games on the road. I mean, if Indiana defeat, I mentioned this to somebody the other day that 9 wins would be a good season for Indiana this year if those 3 teams that I mentioned, and you can throw Illinois in there as well, if all those teams are as good as they're propped up to be. I mean, Indiana could find themselves with 3 losses, maybe 4 losses, and that would put them with an 8-4 record, not even throwing the other teams into the mix just yet. So it's definitely going to be a lot tougher for Indiana to get to where they were last season, and that is the college football playoff. But if they are able to do that, winning the amount of games or similar to the amount of games that they won last year, I think it will definitely be less of a question of whether or not they have earned their way into the playoffs. So it'll be exciting to see how the season plays out, and I'm looking forward to it, as I'm sure you're looking forward to it. And I know many people as well in the back of their minds. And it's in the back of my mind too. I feel like I've done a good job at trying not to go down this road, though, at least in my head. I mean, people look back at the 2020 season and look at how bad 2021 was. You go from having the stellar COVID year where you go to the Outback Bowl, win 8 games, yada, yada, yada. Tom Allen is being praised for everything, deservedly so, for that season. And then you come out and go 2-10 the following year. You start off that season by getting absolutely whooped on the road at Iowa. Michael Penix Jr. throws, I don't know if it was a pick 6, but he threw an interception on the opening play of the game, threw a couple of more picks later on in that game. And it was just a disaster. The beginning of the disastrous season that was for Indiana football. You had a chance to redeem yourself against Cincinnati, and things were going well in that game. That was a Cincinnati team that went to the college football playoff, and you're up, I think, 14-0 on them, and then Micah McFadden gets thrown out of the game for a targeting call that was very questionable, and Cincinnati gets back into the game, and Indiana loses that one. It's also where you had the students who were flipping over the Cincinnati fans' tables. It was very not a good sight to see. But that was the beginning of the end of the Tom Allen era. I don't think we're going down that road with Kurt Signetti. I really don't. But I know it creeps into fans' head. Like, was last year a fluke? I really don't think so. But we'll find out quickly, right? I don't actually, maybe we wouldn't, because the first few games of this season, it's not like where Indiana was having to play Big Ten opponents in week one. No. No more of that nonsense, thankfully. At least not for a while, hopefully. But yeah, that's setting the stage, setting the table for what's to come this upcoming Indiana football season. What else? Let's just go to the Indiana basketball side of things for a little bit, shall we? And then we'll wrap up with some Pacers stuff, some NBA stuff, and then we'll call it a day here on In Touch with Indiana Sports. Anthony Leal's eligibility was denied. I was talking about this with Kyler Staley on last week's In Touch episode. Talked about whether or not, like, if there had been any headway on that, and saw something come through on my timeline the other day that Anthony Leal will not be suiting up for the Hoosiers. And I don't know if they came out with anything for Luke Goody. I remember hearing that both of their situations were nearly identical. But there is a chance that I just didn't see the same announcement for Luke Goody, or maybe I haven't. I don't know. Or maybe they haven't made that announcement, is what I'm trying to say. But either way, I don't think anybody, and this is going to sound like a knock at Anthony Leal, but I think Indiana fans are ready to move on from Anthony Leal. He's gone through 3 coaches. I guess if you included Darren DeVries, he would have been with 3 coaches. And he's had his moments. He's had some really good moments, particularly in like the Big Ten tournament settings later on. Like he's had some really good moments towards the latter parts of each season. And, he had a good career. I guess he was just trying to take advantage of the system that had very little boundaries. And so I guess wishing him all the best. And I guess RIP to the Leal deal. I know that was an NIL thing that always showed up in Assembly Hall whenever he would do something. I don't remember exactly what the stipulation was for getting or maybe you just had to ask for it. I don't know. If somebody knows what the Leal deal was, put it in the comments for me, because I always got a good laugh whenever that would come across my timeline. Other Indiana basketball matters that I want to get to. This is something that I didn't realize that I had missed. I think this had been announced a couple of weeks ago, at least whenever I was looking through my Indiana news. This was a little further down the rabbit hole than I imagined it would be, but I didn't realize that Indiana basketball had already finalized their non-conference slate for the 2025-26 season. And so I was going to go through and react to all the games that they had and just kind of mention how I think things might go. And so looking at it right now, you're kicking off the season, or tipping off the season, I should say, with Alabama A&M on November 5th, a Wednesday. Not much to say other than the fact that that is the opening game, and you hope to see a good showing against a team that is probably a quad 4 opponent, maybe. I know some of the weird A&M schools, I know most of them are usually HBCUs, and some of the HBCUs are better than others. I don't really know a lot about Alabama A&M, but I would imagine you'd like to get a good showing in that matchup. And I know it's Darren DeVries' first game. There'll be a lot of nerves surrounding that. And so seeing Indiana get a 20-point win out of that is really what you want to. I don't know what the spread will be. You just want to see them cover. Is that sort of thing? That's the type of thing that you're looking at. And then after that, you get your first real matchup. I mean, not only second game into the season. You're going to a neutral site. You're going to Chicago to take on the Marquette Golden Eagles. The United Center, a good neutral ground for both teams. Of course, Milwaukee just across the Illinois border, and then you got a lot of Indiana alum in the Chicago area. So that should be a good, you'll probably have more Indiana fans than Marquette fans. That'll be a good neutral court environment for Darren DeVries in his second game as the Indiana Hoosiers head coach. So that will be this early in the season, that'll be a good early barometric test to see what Indiana will be made of against a really good team from the Big East, led by Shaka Smart. And, again, we'll see where they stand pretty early on before they get into another set of cupcakes with Milwaukee, another team from Wisconsin, another team from Milwaukee nonetheless, on November 12th back in Bloomington, Incarnate Word on November 16th, Lindenwood on the 20th. So you got a triumvirate of bye games where Indiana shouldn't have hardly any trouble taking care of business, I would imagine. And then you have another power opponent. You have Kansas State coming to Bloomington. That'll be a nice home matchup to have that seems to have kind of replaced the Kansas matchup, I would imagine. But I don't know if it's going to be a home and home. I don't know if Indiana will be making the return trip to Manhattan, Kansas in subsequent seasons. We'll have to wait and see. The Octagon of Doom, I know they used to call their arena. I'm sure if they're playing in the same arena, I'm sure it still has that nickname. I'd like to see Indiana play in the Octagon of Doom. But who would not want to play a game in an arena with a nickname called the Octagon of Doom? I would love to see a game there just because of the name alone. And then after that, you got Bethune-Cookman at home. And then what a 1-2 punch after that. You get Louisville and Indianapolis as part of the Care Source Invitational supporting mental health. That'll be Pat Kelsey versus Darren DeVries. A coach that a lot of people, myself included, have sang the praises of for what he did in his first season at U of L. And I know they had a disappointing finish against Creighton in the NCAA tournament last year. A lot of people thought they got snubbed for how terrible of a seed they were given. And I vouch for that. I think they kind of got the short end of the stick there. But that doesn't mean that Pat Kelsey isn't building a monster right now with the Louisville Cardinals. So that'll be another good barometer test for the Hoosiers. And then right after that, you go on the road, the renewing of the rivalry between Indiana and Kentucky. Except this time, no John Calipari. You got Mark Pope, a much more likable guy roaming the sidelines in Lexington. And it'll be Indiana's first trip to Rupp Arena since, I think, 2011. I don't have that in front of me. I'm saying that off of memory, which is 14 years ago. And I tell you what, I remember being a kid. I was in middle school at the time. Surrounded by Kentucky and Louisville fans, primarily Kentucky fans. And, when you're in middle school, like, people love to pick on you. When you're the Indiana fan amongst a sea of Kentucky and Louisville fans, you're going to get picked on in some ways. And so that's what helped create my hate for Kentucky the way that I used to have. It's much more mellow. I've had to learn to coexist with them because I have family members who are Kentucky fans. I work for Kentucky Sports Radio on occasion at iHeartRadio as well. And so I've had to just, you learn to put those things to the side, even though you still deep down, you don't want them to do good. And so that'll be fun to see that rivalry renewed. It'll be very tough. Mark Pope did very well in his first season, just like Louisville and Pat Kelsey. And so another great test. I've said that a bunch already. Like, there's 4 really good tests in the non-conference schedule for Darren DeVries. A really solid non-conference slate. And I'm not even mentioning the last 2, or I haven't even mentioned the last 2, Chicago State and Siena. Again, 2 more bye games before you get into just the thick of the Big Ten schedule after that. But a really, really solid 4 barometric tests. I know I've said that term a lot. That may even be the name of today's show, something along those lines, just because it's come out of my mouth a lot now. And so it feels like it's becoming the theme of the show. So we'll see. We'll see how Darren DeVries, we're going to learn a lot very early. Marquette in a neutral floor, Kansas State at home, Louisville on a neutral floor in Indianapolis. I mean, yeah, it's in Indy, but Louisville fans do travel. So that will probably feel like a neutral environment. And so, I mean, it'll probably be Indiana favored, but it'll still have plenty of Louisville fans in attendance at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, I would imagine. And then you cap it all off on the road in Lexington against Kentucky. And I'm going to go ahead and say this right now, too. Indiana, Kentucky, and Louisville should play each other every year. I wish it was to where, each team hosted the other, like in a triangle. It's like you got Kentucky hosting Indiana. I wish Indiana was hosting Louisville, that sort of thing. And then you reverse. And that would also mean Louisville hosting Kentucky. So that's the triangle of all this thing, how it works out. So you get a home game and an away game against both those teams. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to happen, especially because the Kentucky series is more of like it's an Indiana-Kentucky thing. The Indiana-Louisville thing, that came together this past offseason as, I believe, a one-off in Indianapolis. So we'll have to see if they continue to play each other in the future. I don't know what'll end up happening, but nonetheless, I'm excited. This non-conference schedule is really, it's nice and balanced, I feel like, for the most part. You have your fair share of bye games. I hope none of them fit into that quad 4 when I'm looking at them. Chicago State, they're typically horrendous. They'll probably fit into that quad 4. And I already mentioned Alabama A&M. The rest are hit and miss. Milwaukee's had some decent years. Incarnate Word has had a decent year or two. Lindenwood, I believe, has also made the NCAA tournament a couple of times. Bethune-Cookman also fits into that boat. And Siena. So really the only two off the top of my head that really look like, games that could hurt you in your resume if you don't completely obliterate them. The only two games that I think fit that bill are Alabama A&M and Chicago State. So that's an early look at the 2025-26 non-conference basketball schedule. And, again, we'll talk with those in our camp with the Hoosier.com as we get closer about what things look like for the Hoosiers. But before we wrap up today's show, I did want to react to a little bit of Pacers news before we called it a day. And that is the fact that Miles Turner, after 10 years of the Pacers, has decided to move on from Milwaukee, or move on from the franchise. He is moving on to Milwaukee. And I know a lot of people, a lot of Indiana Pacers fans were unhappy with how Miles Turner performed at the NBA Finals. And people were kind of singing his praises leading up to the finals. I know you have one bad series, especially in something as critical as the finals. I could see where it would rub people the wrong way. And again, I'm more of a Pacers casual, so I don't want to speak for the Pacers fan base the way that I would for the Hoosiers. But somebody who had been with Indiana for 10 years, you go to the finals, and I guess maybe you feel like, especially now that Tyrese Halliburton is out of the picture for at least a year, I guess that would make it easier for somebody like him to move on and maybe didn't give Indiana as much of a chance. Because there's a lot of, I guess, moving parts right now with the Pacers franchise when you're dealing with an injury to your star like Tyrese Halliburton like that. If you don't have that, maybe you find a way to make it work out with Miles Turner so you can run it back this upcoming season. But that's obviously not going to be the case. Instead, the Pacers are bringing in, I had his name pulled up earlier, and now I don't know if I have it here in front of me. Is it Jeff Huff from the Memphis Grizzlies? I don't know why I got rid of that. I had that pulled up earlier, but either way, he is somebody who is young. I saw he's 26 years old. So it's somebody who's going to add a little more youth to the center position on the Pacers roster. And so we'll see how he ends up contributing to the Pacers this upcoming season. And one other name that I've seen some people throw out there. It's not somebody who is desired as they used to be, but it's a big name amongst the NBA. The NBA greats, I guess, current greats, if you will, even if they have fallen off a little bit. And that's Russell Westbrook. He's somebody who could fill a temporary void or temporarily fill the void left by Tyrese Halliburton this upcoming season. I believe I saw Russell Westbrook. He's only averaging like 13 points a game, at least last year with the Nuggets, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's not somebody who's going to come in and be, MVP style Russell Westbrook. like with the Oklahoma City Thunder back in his prime, if you will. But he is somebody who could give the Pacers a nice little boost for 1 year. And I don't know what type of deal, he would take right now, but maybe that's something that the Pacers would be willing to humor. And I think it would be interesting to see Russell Westbrook up in Indianapolis. But just wanted to throw that out there. And I guess that's your Pacers news right there. I've already gone a lot longer than I thought I was going to today, but I've enjoyed this episode. I've enjoyed chatting with you all about all the things going on with Indiana football, basketball, and the like. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today, and then we'll get things rolling again next week and have a couple of guests, hopefully, for you all. And then after that, I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to be off in general. I'm going to be on vacation from my iHeartMedia job the following week, the week that Big Ten Football Media Days is going on. There will be no show that week, but we'll come back the following Monday, and I'll give all of my thoughts on what was said at Big Ten Football Media Days. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Look forward to talking with you all again next week. But until then, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com.